You used to enjoy things, and I do not mean that in some grand or dramatic way. I mean you used to wake up on a Saturday morning and feel a quiet gladness about the day ahead of you, a sense that there were things worth doing, and you were the person who wanted to do them. Whether it was gardening or reading or cooking something from scratch or spending an hour with a hobby that nobody else understood, there was a warmth to it, a feeling of yes, this is mine. This is what I choose. And that feeling carried you through the morning the way a current carries a boat without the boat needing to do anything at all. And somewhere along the way, so gradually that you cannot point to the day it happened, that warmth went quiet. The garden is still there. The books are still on the shelf. The kitchen is still yours. But the feeling that once made those things matter has faded the way a photograph fades when it sits in sunlight for too many years. And what remains is something you find very difficult to describe to anyone, because from the outside your life looks perfectly fine. And from the inside, it feels like something essential has gone missing without leaving a note. And so, you do what most people do, which is blame yourself. You assume you have become lazy or dull or ungrateful, and you compare yourself to other people your age who still seem to light up about their weekends and their plans and their projects, and you wonder what is different about you, what you have lost that they still carry, and whether this flatness is just the way things are going to feel from now on. Nobody around you takes it seriously because you are not in crisis, you are not falling apart, you are simply less interested in your own life than you remember being. And that is a sentence most people feel embarrassed to say out loud, so they swallow it and move on and hope it passes on its own. I want to explain to you what is actually happening, because after decades of studying how the mind changes as people age, I can tell you with confidence that this experience is not a mystery, and it is not a character flaw, and it is not something you should be ashamed of. What you are going through has real explanations rooted in how the brain works, how the mind matures, and how a human being's relationship with meaning changes across a lifetime. And once you understand those explanations, the experience stops feeling like failure and starts looking like something far more interesting and far more human. The first explanation is physical, and it begins with a chemical in your brain called dopamine. Most people have heard of dopamine because it gets described in magazines and television programs as the happiness chemical. But that description is misleading, and it causes people to misunderstand what is actually going on. Dopamine is not really about happiness at all. It is about anticipation, about wanting, about that feeling you get when you're looking forward to something and your body starts organizing itself around the idea that something good is on its way. It is the reason a person can sit in a chair on a Thursday evening and feel a little spark of energy about a fishing trip planned for Saturday, or feel a quiet motivation to get into the kitchen because a recipe they have been thinking about all day is finally ready to be tried. That feeling of, I want to go do that, the one that moves you from sitting to standing to actually beginning, is dopamine doing its work. And when it is functioning well, you don't even notice it, because it feels like the most natural thing in the world. What the research tells us, and this has been measured with brain imaging technology and studies published in some of the most respected scientific journals in the world, is that after about age 30, the brain begins to lose its capacity to produce and receive dopamine as efficiently as it once did, at a rate of roughly 6 to 7% every decade. This is not because of illness or depression or anything a person has done wrong. It is simply the way the brain ages. The same way joints lose flexibility, and eyes lose sharpness, and skin loses the elasticity it had at 25. By the time you reach your mid-60s, the system that once created that effortless sense of looking forward to things has genuinely, physically changed. And the result is that activities which used to generate excitement and motivation on their own now require more conscious effort to feel engaging, not because they have become less worthwhile, but because the internal machinery that used to make them feel worthwhile has become less responsive. A research team at University College London demonstrated this beautifully in 2013 in a study published in Nature Neuroscience. They scanned the brains of healthy older adults while they made choices in a simple game involving small rewards. And what they discovered was that the part of the brain responsible for anticipation, a region called the nucleus accumbens, was still perfectly capable of recognizing a reward once it arrived, but had largely stopped generating the anticipatory signal that says something good is coming, and it is worth your effort to go after it. In plain terms, the brain could still feel satisfaction when something good happened, but it had lost much of its ability to make a person want to move toward that good thing in the first place. And here is the part that matters most, because when the researchers gave some of these older adults a medication that temporarily increased dopamine levels in the brain, that anticipatory signal came back. The motivation returned, the decision-making improved, and the brain began responding the way it had years earlier. Which tells us something profoundly important. The desire to engage with life had not disappeared because the person had changed. It had dimmed because the chemistry that supports desire had physically thinned. And that is a distinction that should change the way every person over 60 thinks about their own motivation. Research from Georgia State University confirms this at a broader level, showing that as many as 1 in 3 older adults experience what psychologists call anhedonia, which is simply the clinical term for a reduced ability to feel motivated by or satisfied with activities that used to feel rewarding. And while that word sounds clinical and cold, the experience it describes is deeply personal. It is the experience of standing in your own kitchen, or your own garden, or your own life, and wondering why nothing feels the way it used to. But the brain chemistry is only the first part of the story. And if I stopped here, I would be doing you a disservice. Because the second thing that is happening when you lose interest in old activities is not physical at all. It is psychological. And in many cases, it is not a sign that something has gone wrong, but a sign that something has gone very right. Laura Carstensen, a psychologist at Stanford University, spent decades studying how people's priorities change as they move through life, and what she found is one of the most important discoveries in the entire field of aging research. She calls it socio-emotional selectivity theory, but the idea behind it is beautifully simple. When a person is young and feels like they have unlimited time ahead of them, their brain naturally prioritizes quantity. It wants more experiences, more people, more activities, more novelty. Because the unconscious assumption is that there will always be time to sort through it all later. But as a person moves into their 50s and 60s and begins to sense, not morbidly but honestly, that their remaining time is no longer infinite, the brain quietly shifts its priorities from quantity to quality, from breadth to depth, from collecting experiences to choosing only the ones that carry real emotional weight. This shift is not something you decide to do. It happens beneath your awareness, and it affects everything, not just your friendships and your social life, but your relationship with activities, hobbies, goals, and the way you spend an ordinary afternoon. Things that once felt enjoyable because they were stimulating or distracting, or simply filled the hours, now get measured against a different and much more demanding standard. One that asks, not just, is this pleasant, but does this actually matter to me? Does this connect to something real in my life? Does this feel like it belongs to the person I have become? And when the answer is no, the interest simply drains away, not because the activity has become worthless, but because your mind has matured into a system that refuses to spend its remaining time on things that do not genuinely nourish it. Research published in Psychology and Aging has shown this pattern over and over again. Older adults who allow this natural selectivity to guide them, who keep fewer friendships but invest more deeply in each one, who pursue fewer activities but choose only the ones that carry personal meaning, consistently report higher emotional well-being than people who fight the process and try to maintain the same broad, busy life they had at 40. In other words, this narrowing of interest is not the beginning of decline. It is the beginning of a more honest and more carefully chosen life, and the people who understand that tend to feel more satisfied, not less, with how they spend their days. This is where the mental health perspective becomes critically important, because there is a version of this experience that is healthy, and there is a version that is not. And telling them apart is one of the most consequential skills a person over 60 can develop. Healthy selectivity feels calm and deliberate. It comes with a sense that you are choosing what matters and letting go of what does not, and the areas of life that you have kept continue to feel rich and meaningful. You may have fewer interests than you once had, but the ones that remain still bring you something real. Clinical depression, on the other hand, feels total and heavy and involuntary. It takes away not just the hobbies you have outgrown, but the people and activities you still value. It comes with a persistent exhaustion that sleep does not fix, a sense that nothing at all justifies the effort, and a flattening of feeling that extends into every corner of your day. One is your mind becoming wiser about how it spends its time, and the other is your mind struggling under a weight it cannot carry alone. And the difference between those two experiences is not a small clinical detail. It is the difference between trusting the process and seeking the help you deserve. And the third thing happening when you lose interest in old activities is the deepest of all. And it is the one that almost nobody talks about honestly. It is the question of meaning. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived some of the worst horrors of the 20th century and spent the rest of his life studying what keeps human beings going, wrote about something he called the existential vacuum, which is the feeling a person gets when their life is still functioning on the outside but feels hollow on the inside because the question of what am I really doing this for has not been answered. For much of your adult life, that question stayed quiet because the structures around you answered it for you. Your career gave you purpose, your children needed you, your role in your community gave you a place, your physical strength gave you the ability to act on your ambitions. But as those structures shift, as retirement arrives, and children build their own lives, and the body becomes less cooperative, and the social roles you once held begin to change, the question of meaning rises to the surface in a way it never has before. And if you are not prepared for it, it can feel exactly like depression, even when it is actually something very different. A call from the deepest part of yourself asking you to find a new reason to care about your own life. This is the crossroads that every person over 60 eventually faces, whether they recognize it or not. Your brain's chemistry has changed in ways that make anticipation harder to feel. Your mind has matured in ways that make shallow engagement feel unsatisfying. And your life has shifted in ways that demand a more honest relationship with the question of what truly matters to you. None of these things are failures. Every single one of them is a natural consequence of having lived long enough and carefully enough to outgrow the version of yourself that was satisfied with less. What I want you to understand more than anything else is that your experience is not strange, and it is not shameful, and it is not a sign that the best part of your life is behind you. If the loss of interest you feel is selective, if certain things have faded while others still carry weight for you, if you find yourself drawn to fewer activities, but the ones you choose feel more honest and more real than anything you did at 40, then what you are living through is not illness, it is growth. The kind of growth that only becomes possible after 60 years of learning what matters and what does not. But if the flatness is everywhere, if nothing at all feels worth doing, if even the people and the moments you treasure most have gone gray, then please hear me when I say that is not the price of getting older. That is a condition your brain and your mind are asking you to address, and there is real help available that can make a genuine difference. The distinction between those two experiences, between a mind that is becoming more selective and a mind that is struggling under a burden it cannot manage alone, is the single most important thing a person over 60 can learn about their own mental health. One asks you to trust the wisdom your life has given you. The other asks you to reach out for the support your life has earned you the right to receive. And knowing which one you are living through is not something to guess at or ignore or push through on your own. It is something to take seriously, to explore honestly, and to respond to with the same care and attention you would give to anyone in this world you love. Because after 6 decades of taking care of everything and everyone else, the person who most deserves that kind of attention from you is you.